I don't know exactly when I started to feel like I didn't belong in my own family. It's not like there was a single moment where everything changed. It was gradual, like a slow suffocation. But if I had to point to a turning point, I'd say it began when I was around 12. I'm the middle child. My older brother Brandon was always the golden boy, captain of the soccer team, straight A student, polite, confident, the kind of kid who gets praised in church and gets their photo framed at the dentist's office. My younger sister Chloe was the baby, always sweet, gentle, always had her curls perfectly brushed and a voice like a Disney character. And then there was me. At 12, I started to feel different. I got overwhelmed in crowds. Loud sounds made my skin crawl. I didn't like being touched unless I was prepared for it. I would sometimes get so nervous about school that I'd vomit in the morning. I didn't have the words for it then, but looking back, I can see the signs of anxiety and maybe something neurodivergent. But in my family, there wasn't room for someone who needed something different. There was only normal and broken. My mom first started calling me moody around that time. She said it lightly, like it was a joke, but there was a blade behind it. "You're so sensitive, Haley. You have to toughen up, sweetheart. The world isn't going to bend for you." Brandon would roll his eyes and say I was just trying to get attention. And Chloe would sit quietly, watching, absorbing it all like a sponge. The incident that really set everything in motion happened in 8th grade. We had to do this stupid presentation on a famous person from history. I chose Emily Dickinson. I don't even remember why, and I spent weeks working on it. I was terrified of public speaking, but I practiced over and over in my room, even in front of my stuffed animals. I wanted to do it perfectly. The day of the presentation, my heart was already pounding before I even entered the classroom. My teacher, Mrs. Palmer, called my name. I stood up, holding my note cards so tightly they bent under my fingers. I barely got through the first paragraph before I felt it, the pressure behind my eyes, the dizziness, the sensation of the walls moving closer. I started crying. Not just a few tears. Full on, shaking, breathless crying. I couldn't stop. I fled the classroom. That was the last day I ever stepped foot in that school. My parents picked me up early, and I remember sitting in the car with tissues in my lap, my hands clenched so tight my knuckles turned white. My mom didn't comfort me. She just sighed and said, "We'll figure something out." That night, I overheard her talking on the phone to my aunt. "We think she might be showing early signs of something, mental. Like a disorder or a breakdown. It runs in her father's family, you remember." I sat behind the door listening, my whole body going cold. Nobody had talked to a doctor. Nobody had asked me anything. They were just deciding what I was. The next week, I was officially pulled out of school. They told me I'd be homeschooled, but homeschool was a stretch. I got packets emailed from the school and was expected to work through them alone in my room. My mom would occasionally ask if I'd finished something, but there were no lessons, no help. Just isolation. From that point on, everything I did was seen through the lens of being unstable. If I didn't want to come to dinner, it was because I was acting out. If I got overwhelmed and cried during a loud family gathering, it was because I couldn't handle basic social situations. If I disagreed with something Brandon said, it was a symptom. I was no longer a person in their eyes. I was a problem. My dad wasn't around much to begin with. He worked in another state during the week and only came home on weekends. Even when he was there, he never really saw me. He'd pat me on the shoulder or say, "You doing okay?" But if I didn't say fine, he'd walk away. I stopped answering after a while. My mom started telling the rest of the family that I had episodes. Once, when I was 15, I heard her talking to a neighbor and say, "We're just trying to manage her condition. Some days are better than others." It's been hard on all of us. I didn't even know what condition she was talking about. No one had ever taken me to a therapist. There was no diagnosis. Just whispers and assumptions. The way they talked about me, you'd think I was some feral child who screamed at the walls and clawed at people. But I wasn't. I was scared. I was anxious. And I was incredibly, painfully lonely. Brandon didn't help. In fact, he made things worse. He was 17 when things really escalated. I had been trying to paint in the garage, one of the few things that calmed me down. I'd put on music, quietly, and was mixing blues and greens when he walked in. Without saying a word, he kicked over my paint water, soaking half my sketchbook. When I shouted, he sneered and said, "What? Gonna cry again? Maybe mom can get you a straitjacket next." I lost it. I screamed at him, shoved him, and he laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. Of course, I got blamed. He said I attacked him, and my mom immediately believed him. "Haley, you need help," she said, shaking her head like I was a stranger who had just spit in her face. After that, they started locking the garage. A few weeks later, during a rare visit from my dad's brother, Uncle Mark, I thought maybe someone was finally going to listen. He was the only adult who ever treated me like I wasn't a lost cause. He pulled me aside and asked if I was okay. I hesitated, then told him everything. How they treated me, the isolation, the lies. He looked shocked. For a second, I thought he might say something. But that night, I heard him talking to my parents. "She's crying out for attention," he said. "Maybe a boarding school would do her good." They nodded like it was obvious. And just like that, the last adult I thought I could trust wrote me off too. By 16, I had basically stopped talking during meals. I'd sit at the table like a ghost while Chloe chattered about school, and Brandon bragged about his latest college acceptance letter. My mom would say, "Haley, don't you want to say anything?" But it wasn't really a question. It was a warning. Anytime I did try to speak up, it became an issue. Like the time I asked if I could see a therapist. Just once. My mom's eyes narrowed, and she said, "We're not putting labels on you. That's what they want, to medicate every teenager who's just a little different." She said it like she was protecting me, but I knew she was protecting herself. From shame. From gossip. From having to admit that maybe they'd failed me. I began keeping journals. I wrote down everything. Every conversation. Every lie. Every time they twisted the truth about me. It was the only thing that kept me grounded. One day, Chloe found one of them and read it out loud at the dinner table like it was comedy. "Listen to this part," she giggled. "I think I'm disappearing and no one notices." My mom laughed too, but tried to hide it behind a napkin. I ran out of the house and didn't come back for 3 hours. No one came looking for me. It was like I was living under a microscope. Every emotion I had was dissected. Every word I said was questioned. If I cried, it was manipulative. If I was quiet, it was dangerous. If I smiled, they'd look at me like I was faking it. I sometimes wondered what would happen if I really broke down. Would they finally believe I needed help? Or would they just send me away and pretend I never existed? But I didn't break. I endured. Even when Brandon invited his friends over and they whispered about me like I was some myth. Even when Chloe told her friends I was crazy and warned them not to talk to me if they came over. Even when my mom started locking my door for safety, like I was the threat. I endured. Because deep down, I knew I wasn't what they said I was. And one day I was going to prove it. I left at dawn. No suitcase, no goodbyes, no dramatic confrontations. Just a backpack, $2,181 in cash I'd saved from secret cleaning jobs around the neighborhood, a secondhand duffel, and a one-way Greyhound ticket to Chicago. I didn't leave a note. I didn't text anyone. I walked 2 miles in the dark to the bus stop with my hood up, headphones in, and heart pounding. It was exactly 1 week after my 20th birthday. I planned it for months. Quietly, carefully. I started researching places I could rent. I found a room listed on Craigslist, tiny bare, but not too far from a bus line, with a girl named Veronica who didn't ask too many questions. It was $1,400 a month, all bills included, but it meant sharing a bathroom with 2 other people and keeping my food labeled in a mini fridge. Still, it was mine. I signed the lease online using a prepaid card I'd loaded at a gas station. I hadn't even told the girl my real name. When I stepped off the bus 12 hours later, the Chicago air hit me like a wall. It was colder than I expected, sharp and aggressive, but I didn't care. I was free. Terrified, completely alone, but free. Veronica met me outside the apartment. She had purple hair, a gold nose ring, and a phone constantly attached to her hand. She barely looked up when she said, "3rd floor. Your room's the one with the busted blinds. Bathroom's down the hall. Don't touch anyone's oat milk unless you want to fight." And that was it. My room had no bed. Just a stained mattress on the floor, a cracked window, and a single naked bulb hanging from the ceiling. I cried the first night, not because I regretted it, but because I'd made it. I did it. I got out. Within a week, I had a job. I walked into the Lantern, a 24-hour diner near Wicker Park, with my 1 pair of decent shoes and asked for a job. The manager, Luis, looked me up and down, then said, "Ever waitress before?" "No," I told him honestly. "You'll learn. Wear black. Don't steal tips. You start tomorrow." The job was brutal. I worked the swing shift, 4 p.m. to 2 a.m., taking orders from drunk college kids, business weirdos, and night shift regulars. My feet ached constantly. I smelled like grease and syrup all the time, but I was good at it. I remembered orders. I smiled on command. I was polite. I disappeared into the background. I became invisible by choice this time. 2 weeks later, I enrolled at Franklin Community College. Just part-time English 101 and Introduction to Psych. The campus was gray and depressing, but it had a library and free Wi-Fi. I paid in cash, used a fake address for mail, and sat in the back row every day. I didn't speak unless called on. I kept my head down. I told no one where I was from. Not even Veronica. Sometimes I wondered what story my family was telling in my absence. I didn't have to wonder long. 3 months after I left, I got a Facebook message from a girl named Lila who I vaguely remembered from church youth group. It was short. "Hey, just heard what happened. I'm so sorry. I hope you're safe." I stared at the message for 10 minutes before replying, "What do you mean?" She answered, "Your mom said you had a psychotic break and ran off. Everyone's really worried." I laughed. Out loud. Alone in my freezing room with the busted blinds and a single folding chair. I laughed until my stomach hurt. Of course that's what they said. I didn't reply. Instead, I started documenting everything again. Every shift at the diner. Every class. Every conversation with Veronica. Every small victory, like opening my first bank account using my middle name and a P.O. box. I kept it all in a locked folder on my laptop labeled Taxes. Veronica and I weren't close, but she tolerated me. She worked as a tattoo apprentice and had a rotating door of guys named things like Blaze and Riot. She never remembered to buy toilet paper. But she didn't ask questions when I cried in the shower or jumped at loud noises. We had another roommate, Derek, who was quiet and clean and never left his room except to cook eggs or scream into his headset at 3 a.m. I preferred him to Veronica's boyfriends, one of whom tried to corner me in the kitchen at 2 a.m. and tell me he liked quiet girls. I slammed a mug on the counter and said nothing. He backed off. My classes were going okay. I liked my psych professor, Dr. Collier. He was the first person in years who spoke to me like I was normal. He asked me once after class if I'd ever considered majoring in psychology. "You seem like you've lived through a lot," he said. I just shrugged. Around month 5, things started getting more complicated. One night, while wiping down a booth at the diner, I heard a voice say my name. My real name. Not Hannah, the name I gave at work. My real one. Haley. I froze. It was a man in his 50s, bald, with a red windbreaker and a too familiar face. It took me a few seconds to place him. Pastor Rick. From our old church. He looked stunned. "Your mother said you were in a hospital. Are you okay to be here?" I didn't answer. I turned, walked into the kitchen, and threw up in the sink. Louise sent me home early. I didn't explain. The next day, I changed shifts. Started working mornings, even though the tips were worse. I cut my hair short, dyed it dark. Bought new clothes at a thrift store 2 neighborhoods over. But it was too late. The damage was done. 2 weeks later, I started getting texts from numbers I didn't recognize. Unknown, "Is this Haley?" "It's Chloe. Please call me." Unknown, "They're freaking out. Just tell them you're okay." Unknown, "Mom said you've gone completely off your meds. That you're refusing treatment." I blocked all of them. I didn't respond. But it got worse. Someone called the diner pretending to be my guardian, saying I was mentally unstable and might be working under false identity. Luis pulled me into the office and asked straight out, "Is this real?" I stared at him and said, "If I was a man running from an abuser, would you ask me that?" He blinked. Didn't say anything. Then said, "You're a good worker. Don't cause drama. We'll forget the call." After that, I stopped using my real name anywhere. Not even for mail. I set up everything under aliases. My community college ID said H. Moore. My work badge just said H. I was legally invisible. But emotionally, I was unraveling. The panic attacks came back. I started sleeping with the dresser pushed in front of the door. Any knock made me jump. I carried pepper spray on my keychain, checked behind me constantly, and memorized the bus schedule in case I had to run. Then Veronica started getting suspicious. "You in some kind of trouble?" she asked one night after noticing I kept moving furniture around. "No," I said. "You're a bad liar," she muttered. She started locking her bedroom door. She told her boyfriend I was off. I overheard her say she thought I might be stealing from her. I wasn't. By month 8, the apartment was unbearable. I found a new listing, same price, but shared with 3 other girls near the UIC campus. I met the leaseholder, a woman named Kennedy, who was strict about rules but polite. I moved out while Veronica was at work. Left behind the busted blinds and the mug I used as a toothbrush holder. I told no one where I was going. Again. By now, I was surviving, but barely. I worked 6 days a week. Went to class 2 days a week. Did laundry at 2 a.m. in coin machines that never fully dried anything. Ate mostly toast and boiled eggs. I carried all my cash in a zippered pouch in my boot. And I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped in the form of a woman named Mrs. Gallows. She showed up at my psychology class wearing a long gray coat and a polite smile. She said she was from Youth and Family Wellness Outreach, but I recognized the shape of the lie. She was a private investigator. "I'm just here to check in," she said. "You've been reported missing." "I'm not," I told her. "I'm 20. I left home voluntarily." She nodded slowly. "Your family's very worried. They mentioned mental health concerns." "I'm not on any meds. I've never been diagnosed with anything. Ask a doctor. They said you refused treatment." Because there was never treatment. Just rumors. She made a note in her binder. I never saw her again. But after that, I lived even smaller. I erased every trace of myself I could find online. I stopped posting, deleted old accounts, used VPNs, burned anything with my name on it. And yet, I still had to keep living. There were still moments of light. Like when I passed my first psych midterm with a 92%. Or when Kennedy offered to split groceries with me. Or when a regular at the diner named Sam, an elderly man who ordered the same oatmeal every morning, left me a $50 tip and said, "You look like someone with a story." I didn't tell him it. But I smiled for the first time in weeks. Still, I knew the story my family told was the only one people believed. That I ran off during an attack. That I was unwell. That I was not safe alone. And maybe to them, that would always be the truth. But to me, the truth was this. I left because I had to. I survived because I had no other choice. And even though I was barely scraping by, in a city full of strangers, with no safety net and no one to catch me, I was finally free. And no matter what they said, they could never take that from me. I was 26 when I met Michael. I wasn't looking for anything. I was working 2 jobs, still waitressing on weekends, and during the week I was doing freelance proofreading for self-published romance novels. It was mindless, steady, and just enough to pay rent in the crumbling 2-bedroom I shared with a girl named Renee, who had 3 cats and a habit of reading aloud in the bathtub. Michael came into the diner on a Tuesday. It was dead. Just me, 1 cook in the back, and 2 booths occupied by laptop zombies sipping refill coffee. He walked in with a stack of papers clipped together and sat in the corner, ordered black coffee and a tuna melt. I didn't notice him until he looked up at me mid-bite and said, "You ever read The Bell Jar?" I blinked. Once. A while ago. He held up the paper he'd been grading. This girl turned in a book report that describes it as a classic love story about a woman and her therapist. I'm going to scream. I laughed, involuntarily. That's the most cursed interpretation I've heard. He smiled. I'm Michael, by the way. That's how it started. Over the next few weeks, he came in more often. Tuesdays. Sometimes Thursdays. He always brought papers to grade and ordered the same thing. Eventually, he started staying past his meal, just chatting with me at the counter. He was 31, taught high school English at a charter school a few neighborhoods over, and knew how to pronounce Kafkaesque without sounding like a jackass. I told him I was taking online classes in literature and doing editing work, but I didn't tell him much else. Not at first. He asked me out after 6 weeks. I said no. He asked again 2 weeks later. I said maybe. The third time I said yes. We got Thai food and watched an indie movie that neither of us understood but both pretended to enjoy. It felt safe. Michael was the first person I didn't have to manage emotionally. He didn't need me to be funny. Didn't ask what was wrong if I was quiet. He didn't get uncomfortable when I talked about hard things, and he never used my reactions against me. I told him about my family a few months in. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "You know that sounds like abuse, right?" I nodded, but I didn't really feel it yet. I still believed on some level that maybe I had been unstable. That maybe they'd been right. Michael suggested therapy gently, like someone offering a glass of water to a person who's just run a marathon. I know it's expensive, he said, but I'll help if you want. The first session cost $250. Michael insisted on paying for half. I chose a woman named Dr. Eliana Brooke because her profile said she specialized in adult survivors of childhood emotional abuse and complex PTSD. I almost canceled 3 times before the appointment. When I showed up, I was shaking so badly I dropped my keys twice trying to unlock my bike chain. Dr. Brooke had kind eyes and a voice like gravel smoothed by sand. She didn't ask me what was wrong. She asked me what had happened. I talked for almost the full hour. She didn't look surprised, not once. When I was done, she said, "Haley, everything you've described fits the profile of long-term gaslighting and emotional neglect." I stared at her. "You weren't unstable," she said. "You were trapped in an environment that invalidated your every thought and feeling. Your reactions weren't signs of disorder. They were signs of survival." It was like someone cracked open my ribcage and let fresh air in. I started seeing her weekly. I kept waitressing and freelancing, but Michael insisted on covering the therapy costs until I could manage. We didn't move in together right away. He was cautious, and so was I, but he gave me a key to his place after a year. His apartment smelled like old books and coffee and something faintly lemony I later found out was wood polish. The first time I had a panic attack in front of him, full body shaking, hyperventilating, he sat beside me on the floor, didn't touch me, didn't speak, just breathed with me until it passed. Later he said, "You don't scare me, Haley." That mattered more than he knew. A year later, we got married. It was a quiet courthouse thing. No family, no big dress, no flowers. I wore a navy blue skirt and black boots. He wore the only suit he owned, with a crooked tie. Our friend Kennedy, who had once been my roommate and now worked at a graphic design firm, was our witness. We didn't throw a reception. We went to a sushi place afterward and split a bottle of plum wine. 3 months after the wedding, Michael's aunt passed away and left him a small inheritance. Combined with his teacher savings and a low-interest loan, we were able to make an offer on a 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood just outside the city. It was listed at $670,000. We offered $655,000. They countered at $667,000. We signed the papers 2 weeks later. I still remember the first night in that house. It was quiet in a way I wasn't used to. No sirens. No neighbors stomping above. Just silence and a creaky porch swing. I didn't sleep much. I kept getting up to check the locks. Michael said, "You'll adjust." I said, "I'm afraid I'll lose it all." He said, "You won't." We had our daughter Emily a year later. Labor was rough. 27 hours. I tore in 2 places. But the moment they put her on my chest, I cried harder than I ever had in my life. She had my eyes. Michael's nose. She didn't cry much. Just looked around like she already had questions. 2 years after that, we had Lucas. His birth was easier, but he screamed like someone had insulted him. His fists were always clenched. He looked angry even when he slept. Emily is 10 now. Lucas is 7. Emily writes stories. Lucas climbs everything. He broke his arm last year falling off the banister. I sat in the ER with him, and when the nurse asked if I had anyone I needed to call, I almost said no one out of habit. Then I remembered. I had a husband at home, dinner on the stove, a daughter doing homework, and a life that didn't require an explanation. We don't talk to my family. They tried. A few times. Chloe sent me a Facebook friend request after Emily was born. Her profile picture was of her in a wedding dress, standing beside a man I didn't recognize. I didn't accept it. Brandon emailed me once. Said he'd matured and wanted to rebuild. I read it twice, then deleted it. My mother never reached out directly, but Michael got a letter once. Handwritten. She'd found our address through some online search service. She wrote that she hoped Haley is stable now and that it's nice she found someone who understands her condition. Michael burned it in the backyard fire pit. Said nothing. We never brought it up again. I'm still in therapy. I go twice a month now. Still $250 a session, but worth every cent. Dr. Brooke helped me understand the layers of what I went through, how deep it went, how early it started. She called it emotional amputation, the way they'd trained me to cut myself off from reality, from trust, from my own instincts. She taught me how to identify healthy love, how to parent without reenacting trauma, how to let go of narratives that weren't mine to carry. Emily once asked me why she doesn't know grandma. I told her the truth, age appropriate. Some people don't know how to love in safe ways, I said. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. She nodded like it made sense. Like it was already something she understood. Lucas asked if he could build a robot to protect our house. I told him he could build 10. Our neighbors are kind. There's a retired couple across the street who bring us tomatoes. The girl next door babysits sometimes. I have a garden now. Cherry tomatoes, basil, kale. I still wait tables on weekends, just for the extra cash. Michael laughs about it, but I like the rhythm of it. I like knowing I can handle it all on my own if I had to. We still have hard days. I still freeze if someone raises their voice unexpectedly. I still double-check the locks at night. But when I lie down beside Michael, with our kids asleep down the hall, and the house silent except for the hum of the fridge, I don't feel broken anymore. I feel safe. And that feeling is worth everything. Emily was 8 when I heard it. It was a Tuesday. I remember because Lucas had just spilled grape juice all over his math worksheet and I was trying to clean the table, soothe the crying 7-year-old, and not lose my mind before 10 a.m. Emily came into the kitchen, holding her tablet, brows drawn together in that worried little crease she gets when something doesn't sit right. Mom, she said. Is it true you're sick in the head? I stopped scrubbing. What did you just say? She looked confused. Amelia told me. She said her mom said you're mentally sick. Like, you went to a hospital or something. I went cold. The sponge slipped from my hand into the juice. I knelt down to her level and asked, who's Amelia? She's my cousin, right? Aunt Chloe's daughter. The room seemed to tilt. I hadn't even known Chloe had a child. I'd blocked every family member years ago. No phone calls, no emails, no contact. Michael knew the boundary and respected it like gospel, but somehow somewhere someone had reached in. My daughter was hearing their version of me. I kept my voice calm. Did you talk to Amelia online? Emily nodded. Yeah, on that game. StarCrafts? No. Star Pets. It has a chat. She said we're cousins. She knew my name, and she sent me a picture of her and her mom. It looked like Aunt Chloe from that old wedding photo you showed me once. Michael was already standing behind me. He must have heard from the hallway. He asked Emily gently, did she say anything else, sweetheart? She said Mommy used to live in a hospital and that I shouldn't ask about it, cause it's grown-up stuff. I felt like vomiting. After I calmed Emily and got her and Lucas set up with a cartoon, I checked her tablet. The chat history was there. A kid account named MiaBug2009 had sent a photo of Chloe holding a girl who looked around Emily's age, with dark hair and the same dimples Chloe used to weaponize when she wanted something. The chat log was mostly harmless, emoji-laden exchanges, shared drawings, outfit reviews. But 2 lines froze me. MiaBug2009. My mom said your mom ran away from her family. MiaBug2009. She had a sickness in her brain. It wasn't the words that made me sick. It was the tone. Pity, filtered through a child. That's how they were raising her, to pity me like I was a tragedy. Michael and I sat down that night. No TV, no wine, just silence and strategy. I'm setting a hard rule, I said. No independent contact. Not with anyone tied to them. He didn't argue. Agreed. I don't care how indirect the line is, game apps, old mutual friends mail. I need a digital wall, and I need to build it fast. I'll help. I reached out to Star Pets, had the account blocked, then deleted Emily's entirely. I locked down every single app she used. I ran a security scan on the house Wi-Fi, checked every profile and alias tied to her school email, and changed the parental settings on both kids' devices. Then I got to work on something else, something I should have started years ago. I called the folder when they asked why. It started as a digital folder on my private hard drive. Within a week, it became 3 folders, 1 digital, 1 physical binder in a locked cabinet, and 1 cloud-based backup. The archive would be their inheritance. Not money. Not heirlooms. Truth. I began with the old stuff. Screenshots of my mother's messages, the email Brandon sent me asking to rebuild, followed by his passive-aggressive jabs about mental hygiene. The letter Michael received, which he'd scanned before burning. Even Chloe's wedding website, which had once included a thinly veiled reference to family we've lost along the way. By choice, not death. Next, I added audio. Dr. Brooke helped me structure a personal record. I recorded voice memos talking about specific memories and how they were later manipulated. I labeled them chronologically, by year and theme. Gaslighting incidents, school withdrawal, emotional invalidation, fabricated stories. It was methodical, clinical. I printed out the message Lila had sent me years ago about the psychotic break rumor. I added my own annotations in red pen. Michael helped too. He filed screenshots of social media whispers we'd seen before, blocking everyone. Post slick. Some people just can't be helped. You try to love them, but they run from treatment. It's sad. That one was from a mutual cousin I hadn't spoken to since I was 15. I wasn't just building a case for my children. I was building a record of survival. One they'd be able to hold in their hands one day when someone tried to rewrite history. But I knew there would be more fallout. There always was. 2 weeks after cutting all app access and issuing a notice to Emily's school that any inquiries from extended family were to be reported directly to us, I got a call from the vice principal. She was polite but cautious. "Hi, Mrs. Trent. I just wanted to inform you that a woman claiming to be your mother came to the front desk this morning asking if she could drop off a package for your daughter." My breath stopped. What did she look like? Mid-60s, well-dressed, said her name was Karen, spelled Z-R-N, said she was visiting from out of town. That was her. I told them in very plain terms, do not let that woman near my child again. She has no custody rights, no contact rights, and if I need to bring legal documents proving that, I will. The school apologized profusely. I drafted a formal no-contact letter and filed it with the school office and with the district superintendent. I included the letter Karen had sent Michael, plus a statement from Dr. Brooke affirming the history of coercive abuse. After that, we bought a Ring camera for the porch and another one for the back gate. I started sleeping with my phone beside my pillow again. Then came the package. Left in our mailbox. No return address. Inside a doll. Handmade. Brown hair, blue dress, stitched initials 8. I almost screamed. Emily never saw it. I burned it in the fireplace while Michael watched. But I kept the box. Bagged it. Photographed the label. Added it to the archive. There was something deeply sinister in the way they had used a child, Amelia, to breach my family's perimeter. Whether Chloe had done it consciously or not, it didn't matter. It was a line crossed. And I wasn't going to let my kids grow up wondering if I'd overreacted. I told Emily the basics. Enough for her to understand why those chats had to stop. Sometimes grown-ups say things that aren't true, I said. And sometimes they tell those things to kids so they spread. That's not fair to you. I need you to know that your brain, your heart, your voice, they're yours. No one gets to tell your story but you. She looked sad, but she nodded. I could tell she believed me. But I also knew it wouldn't be the last time someone would try to challenge the narrative. So I kept building. I added therapy notes. Summaries of sessions with Dr. Brooke that she agreed to let me paraphrase and annotate. Things like, patient exhibits high-functioning behavior despite long-term gaslighting and family scapegoating. Verbal recollections consistent with CPTSD caused by emotional manipulation and parental invalidation. I gathered news articles about adult children going no contact with toxic families. I included research on trauma cycles, the effects of forced narrative reprogramming, and studies on sibling triangulation. It became a vault. When they asked why wasn't just a defense. It was a weapon. Because I knew what was coming next. Lucas started asking questions. Why don't I have a grandma like other kids? I sat with him on the couch, held his little hand, and said, sometimes people can't love in ways that feel safe. It's not your fault. But I protect you from anyone who might hurt you, even with their words. He asked if grandma yelled. I said, not always. Sometimes she smiled while she hurt me. That's why it's confusing. He just hugged me and said, I don't want anyone to hurt you. That night, I added another voice memo to the archive. Lucas asked about my mother. I answered honestly but gently. I will always tell them the truth in age-appropriate ways. I won't lie and I won't hide. Michael added to the project too. He wrote a letter titled Why I Stand With Her and included, I've seen her strength, her honesty, and the decades of pain she endured. I've read every message they sent, watched every manipulation unfold, and I will never let my children grow up doubting the reality of what happened to their mother. I cried when I read it, then printed it, added it to the binder, and filed it under testimonies. Months passed. No more packages. No more calls. But the fear never fully left. Sometimes I'd see someone on the street with her hair color and flinch. I double-checked school forms for hidden inquiries. I screened every unknown number. The archive grew. It now has its own encrypted hard drive. A second backup in a bank deposit box. Passwords known only to me and Michael. Emily is 10 now. She reads fast, questions everything, and recently asked if she could learn to journal. I gave her a blank notebook and said, this is where your voice lives. You write whatever you want. No one gets to change it. One day when they're old enough, I'll show them the archive. Not as a warning, as a history. Because I won't let someone else write my story for them. And I won't let them forget that truth is a form of love. Even when it hurts. It started with a bedtime story. Emily was 10 and struggling. Her teacher had assigned a group project where one of the other girls, Leah, I think, casually said something about how some moms are just crazy. Apparently her own mother had made a comment about those women who make drama with their families. Emily didn't say anything in the moment. She kept it inside like a burning coal. But that night, when I came to kiss her goodnight, she asked, how do you know if a story about someone is true? I sat on the edge of her bed, tucked the blanket tighter around her, and said, if they weren't in the story, they shouldn't be the one telling it. She nodded slowly, then said, I want to hear your story. But maybe like a fairy tale. That night, I stayed up until 2 a.m. writing the first draft of what would become The Girl with the Locked Wings. It was about a little bird who lived in a silver cage with her family. The cage was full of mirrors, and every time she tried to sing her own song, the mirrors would shout back lies. The older brother bird was always polished, always praised. The little sister bird fluttered around sweetly. But the middle bird, the girl with the locked wings, was told she was broken because she didn't sing like the rest. She believed them. Until one night, a wind carried a real bird song into the cage, and she realized she'd never heard anything like it before. That was the beginning. I read it to Emily the next night, and when I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "That was you, wasn't it?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. She hugged me tight. "Write more." So I did. I started a blog. It was private, password protected, invite only. I called it Truth in Pieces. It wasn't meant for adults. It was written entirely for children, mine, and others like them. For kids who'd one day wonder why their mom or dad kept their distance from relatives. Why certain names weren't mentioned. Why their family tree had intentional blank spaces. Each story was a puzzle piece. Every fairy tale was based on a real memory, but reimagined, coded, turned into something a child could feel in their chest without drowning in the complexity. One story, The House of Shifting Walls, was about a girl who lived in a magical home where every time she spoke, the walls rearranged to deny she'd ever said anything at all. The girl began to question her own memories until she found a secret journal buried in the floorboards, full of the truth. Another story, The Whisper Tree, followed a fox cub whose forest relatives spread rumors about her through enchanted leaves. The fox eventually discovered the tree and carved her own message into the trunk. "This is my voice." Within 6 months, I had dozens of subscribers. Most were other parents in strange situations. Some I'd met in online support forums, some referred quietly through friends of friends. They wrote to me, saying things like, "This is the first time I found something my daughter can read that doesn't scare her. My son now understands why I don't talk to my mom. He asked to read it again last night." Some of them asked if I'd ever published the stories in a book. I hadn't thought about it. But then I started sketching. I'm not a professional illustrator, but I'd done enough painting in my early 20s to get by. I took a few online courses on children's book layout, practiced for months, and finally hired a freelance designer named Karina, an Armenian single mother I met through a trauma survivors writer circle, to help format the book. We went all in on the design. Heavy paper, hardcover, no digital version. Each copy had hand-numbered pages and gold foil edges. I wanted it to feel sacred. The first book, The Girl with the Locked Wings, launched quietly. I priced it at $85. People called me crazy. Who pays $85 for a children's book? People who need to remember the story matters. I sold the first 50 copies in 3 days. Each buyer got a private code to access bonus audio readings I recorded myself, along with a printable workbook of discussion questions for parents and kids. Michael handled the orders. Emily helped pack them. Lucas drew a guardian wolf on the inside flap of every copy until we ran out of Sharpies. It felt like we were doing something more than just telling bedtime stories. We were reclaiming narrative. The second book took longer. The girl who rewrote the ending followed the same heroine, now living in a village where everyone believed she'd once destroyed a bridge. In truth, the bridge had collapsed on its own, but the villagers preferred the lie. The girl had to learn not to rebuild the bridge just to prove her innocence, but to build a better one in a different place. It was harder to write. It made me confront the ache I still carried, the people who'd never believed me. The ones who still told the old story, the broken girl who fled, the unstable one, the sad middle child. That book took a toll on me emotionally. I had to pause therapy work and increase sessions with Dr. Brooke. She reminded me that even when we tell the truth with love, it costs something. Still, I finished it. We released it a year after the first. Another $85. This time we sold 100 copies in 4 days. We added signed editions and limited art prints. A teacher in Oregon asked to use it in her elementary reading group. A women's shelter in Michigan bought 10 for their in-house library. But not everyone celebrated. One day, I got an email from a woman named Denise Barlow. The name rang a bell. Turned out she was my cousin Sarah's old best friend. The subject line was, "Shame on you." She wrote, "You should be embarrassed, Haley. Writing children's stories to justify abandoning your family? Lying to your own kids? Everyone knows the real story. Your mom is heartbroken. Brandon says you've lost touch with reality. This isn't healing. This is delusion." I added the email to when they asked why and didn't respond. But it shook me. For days, I questioned whether I was harming my kids by pulling them into this narrative, whether I was teaching them to fear instead of to love, whether I was no better than the people I had run from. I brought it to Dr. Brooke. She said, "You are giving your children context. The difference is, you're offering them truth, gently, creatively, age-appropriately. That's not manipulation. That's protection." I needed to hear that. So I kept writing. Emily asked me recently if the girl with the locked wings ever finds her real home. I told her, she builds it. One room at a time. She smiled. Then I want to help build it too. Lucas chimed in. Can I write the wolf side story? Of course he can. The blog continues. Every month, I release a new short tale, The Mirror That Lied, The Quietest Giant, The Rope That Wasn't a Lifeline. We keep the stories private, shared only with people who understand their weight. I still don't speak to my family. I don't monitor them. I don't look them up. But I know they talk. I know somewhere someone is telling their child that I went off the rails, that I made up the abuse, that I'm writing twisted children's stories. That's fine. Because my children won't be learning my history through gossip and silence. They'll have stories. They'll have art. They'll have the truth in pieces they can hold. And one day when they're ready, they'll have the whole picture. Not just the broken version someone else tried to paint. I found the chat by accident. I wasn't looking for it. I was actually trying to recover a few old family contact entries I had saved under code names, back when I used to track everything just in case. I was combing through an ancient Yahoo inbox I hadn't touched in years. It was linked to an old online game account Emily once asked me about. When I logged in, the inbox was full of junk. Newsletters. Expired coupons. A few spammy messages from bots. But one subject line caught my eye. Family, do not forward cousin thread. It was from someone named LauraRuth74 at. I opened it and felt my entire body go cold. Inside was a link to a shared Google chat thread. No password. No luck. It was titled, Haley Family Emergency Private. 20 participants. All familiar names. Brandon. Chloe. My cousin Sarah. My aunt Denise. Even my father's second wife, who I barely remembered meeting. People I hadn't seen in years. And people who, apparently, still talked about me. I clicked. The messages stretched back for months. The first one was from Brandon. Just found out Haley is selling those twisted children's books for nearly $100 a pop. Insane. She's clearly monetizing her trauma narrative again. Another from Chloe, she tells those stories like they're truth. No one remembers her being abused. If anything, she was aggressive and unstable. Denise, honestly, she scares me. I wouldn't want my kids around someone who made up things about her own mother. A few tried to be reasonable. My cousin Elaine chimed in. Maybe she really believes it. You know, mental illness can distort reality. The worst was from Aunt Colleen. She's poisoning her children against their heritage. That's a kind of abuse too. She shouldn't be raising kids without supervision. I scrolled. Hundreds of messages. Photos pulled from my public blog, shared out of context. Speculation about Michael. Do you think he's being manipulated? Rumors about therapy, about how I'd cut off ties because she can't handle confrontation. Someone had even suggested sending CPS an anonymous tip, just to shake her a little. I couldn't breathe. I took screenshots of every single message. I timestamped them. I documented the participants. I backed it all up. Then I did the only thing that felt right. I emailed each one of them separately. No threats. No rage. Just clarity. I wrote, you may not know that this chat was left open to an uninvited viewer. I've read every message. I've seen every comment, accusation, and attempt to pathologize me. I've saved them all. This is no longer about disagreement. It's coordinated defamation, and I won't let it go undocumented. Then I attached 5 screenshots to each message. Not all. Just enough to show them that I'd seen it. That I wasn't bluffing. Michael begged me to wait. To let our lawyer see it first. But I knew them. I knew how they operated. Letting them know I knew was the point. The responses were immediate. Within 2 hours, my phone buzzed nonstop. Unknown numbers. Blocked calls. Private messages flooding a backup inbox I forgot to deactivate. Brandon's email came first. What the hell is wrong with you? That thread wasn't about you. It was about you, yes, but not to you. There's a difference. You don't get to violate our privacy and then act like you're the victim. I saved it. Added it to the archive. Next came Sarah. Why would you take it this far? We're worried about you. This proves everything we said. You're paranoid, unstable, and obsessed with being a victim. And Denise. You just blew up any chance of healing. This was the final straw. Legal action is now on the table. That night, we received an envelope taped to our front door. No stamp. No postage. Just our names printed in thick marker. Inside was a letter on official-looking letterhead, Family Legacy Protection Council. Michael held it up and squinted. That's not a real thing. It was a fake legal document. The language was full of pseudo-law jargon. Cease and desist publication of defamatory fictional content framed as autobiographical narrative. Failure to retract and destroy published material may result in civil pursuit for familial defamation and emotional distress. We both laughed. For maybe 20 seconds. Then I took a deep breath and said, this is the beginning. It's only going to escalate. He nodded. I'm ready. But I wasn't ready for what came next. A week later, I went to check the mailbox and found a large bubble-wrapped envelope addressed to The Real Haley. Inside was one of my childhood photo albums. At first, I didn't recognize it. The cover had been defaced. My name scribbled out with red ink, pages torn at random. But it was mine. I'd kept a few old albums from the attic before I moved. This was one I hadn't seen in years. Inside, someone had written in the margins of the photos. A picture of me at 6, crying during a birthday party, unstable even then. Another of me on a school field trip, standing alone. No one wanted to be near her. A family photo at Christmas. She ruined this day. Some of the photos had been scratched out. Others had captions added in a different handwriting. Lies begin here. Michael took it from my hands before I dropped it. Don't touch anything else, he said. I'll bag it. We treated it like a crime scene. The delivery had no tracking. No fingerprints, according to the officer who later took the report. No clear suspect. But I knew. It had been hand-delivered. No postmark. No courier. Someone from that group had come to my neighborhood. Again. I filed a second police report. Not because I expected justice, but because I wanted a record. Another layer in the archive. Then I took every photo, every defaced caption, and scanned it into the file labeled Family Conspiracy Escalation Evidence. I added a timeline. I listed the chat, the responses, the letter, the album. I was building a map of harm. Michael started sleeping closer to the kids' rooms. I checked the locks 5 times a night. I added a second camera facing the back alley and reinforced the basement windows. Emily asked, "Why do we need so many cameras?" I told her, "To stay safe from people who don't know how to leave us alone." She nodded, but I saw the fear creeping in. Lucas started drawing wolves again. They now wore armor. I brought it all to Dr. Brooke. She stared at the photos for a long time. "This is not just defamation," she said. "This is psychological warfare. And you're right to treat it like evidence." Because it is. She wrote me a formal statement for legal protection, describing my family's pattern of escalating boundary violation and character sabotage. I haven't published it publicly. Yet. But I backed it up in 5 places. And I made a new folder. If anything happens to me. Inside are letters for Emily and Lucas. Passwords. Dr. Brooke's evaluations. A log of every contact attempt. A flash drive of audio recordings, voice memos, and legal copies. I told Michael, if they ever try something bigger, I want them exposed completely. He kissed my forehead and said, "They already exposed themselves. All you're doing is shining a light. The hardest part isn't the fear. It's the betrayal. These weren't strangers. These were people who held me when I was a baby. Who ate dinner at our house. Who bought me birthday gifts and then tore me apart in a private thread like I was subhuman. But I don't react anymore. I document. That's the only language they understand now. Facts. Evidence. Truth they can't erase. So I keep going. I keep the locks changed. The camera's on. The backup's current. And I write it all down. Because one day, my children will read these files. And they'll know exactly what was done, and why I stood firm. Not out of vengeance. Out of protection. Out of love. Out of truth. I was 38 when I started writing the memoir. Not for the internet. Not for a publisher. Not even for my therapist. For them. Emily and Lucas. By then, the kids were old enough to start asking more complex questions. About family, about the stories they heard at school, about why we had a lot of photo albums but not many photos of Grandma or Uncle Brandon. They weren't suspicious. Just curious. Emily, now 12, was in a phase of fierce honesty. She wrote poetry. She asked hard questions. She didn't like when people answered vaguely. One day after dinner, she said, "I know we have the archive, but I want to know what it felt like. Not just what happened." She wanted the story from me, in my voice. So I started. At first it was scattered, voice memos, scribbled notes in margins, Word documents labeled things like Basement Fight 2008 and Crying in the Garage. Eventually I began organizing it into chapters. Michael suggested I buy a document scanner to integrate everything. "You're going to want a timeline." Trust me, he was right. I spent 4 months creating what I eventually labeled Legacy Archive, Personal History for E&L. Inside were 7 sections. Memoir chapters, written in plain language. Visual archive, family photos, annotated, scanned letters, legal documents. Transcripts, conversations from old messages and phone calls I had documented. Therapy summaries, notes approved by Dr. Brooke. Timeline, year-by-year breakdown of key events. Supplemental reading, books and articles on emotional abuse and recovery. Letters, one to each child, written on the night of their births, and one that began, "In case I'm not here to explain this myself." I stored it all on an encrypted hard drive kept in our fireproof safe, with 2 additional backups, one cloud-based, one physical, secured through Michael's work system. It wasn't meant to be read yet. But it would be waiting. The school project came later, completely out of nowhere. Emily was in 7th grade. They were assigned a presentation. My hero, my inspiration. She didn't tell me what she'd chosen. Just asked me to help her format some slides. That morning Michael and I were both off work. Lucas was at a friend's house. Emily handed me her tablet and said, "Just check for typos." I opened the PowerPoint. The title was, "The Strongest Person I Know, My Mother." Slide 1. A photo of me at 21, wearing my first waitress uniform, smiling awkwardly. Slide 2. She left home at 20 with no help, no support, and no money. Slide 3. People said she was unstable. She was scared. But she still left. Slide 4. She built a life from scratch. And she never lied to me, even when the truth was ugly. I blinked back tears. Michael sat beside me and didn't say anything. We both just stared. The last slide was a quote. "Being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you keep going anyway." My mom. The presentation was scheduled for that Friday. I walked her to school that morning. She carried the tablet like it was glass. When she came home that afternoon, she had a new bracelet on her wrist, pink beads and letter charms that spelled truth. She said, "Zara made it for me." She said my story was the most real. I was still absorbing that when the email arrived. From Brandon. Subject line, "I saw the presentation." My stomach sank. It wasn't public, but apparently one of the parents in attendance, Elise Roden, was his old college classmate and had recognized the last name. Small world. The message was short. I never expected to write this. But I saw Emily's project. I'm not proud of how I've acted. There's more I remember than I ever admitted. Things I saw. Things I let happen. You're not crazy, Haley. You never were. I'm sorry it took me this long to say that. I know this doesn't fix anything. But I wanted you to hear it from me. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know if I should. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding the phone, trying to process the weight of what it meant. After all the years of gaslighting, the lies, the silence, my brother, the golden one, had just cracked. Michael read it, then looked at me and said, "You don't have to answer. Closure is an ode." I nodded. But I forwarded the email to my archive inbox, then printed it, timestamped it, and filed it under Acknowledgements Unexpected. Not because I needed it, but because it belonged in the record. The truth didn't need applause or permission. It just needed to be known. After that, things changed, quietly. I noticed Emily asking deeper questions, less about what happened, more about how it felt. She once asked, "Were you ever happy as a kid?" I thought about it. Then I said, "Not often. But I remember one time I made a castle out of books, and for 10 minutes, I believed I was safe inside it." She didn't say anything. She just wrote it down. Lucas, younger but just as perceptive, asked, "Are we allowed to be mad at people you don't talk to?" I said, "You're allowed to feel however you feel. The truth doesn't need you to be mad. Just to know what happened." I never tried to shape their feelings. Just the facts. One day, Emily asked if she could read part of the memoir. I gave her chapter 3, The Day I Ran. She read it in one sitting, then asked, "Was it cold when you left?" "Yes," I said. "But not as cold as staying." She didn't cry. She just hugged me for a long time. That night, I added a new letter to the archive. It began, "You asked me what I felt when I left. Here's what I didn't tell you." I now update the archive monthly. Not out of paranoia. Out of love. I include recent reflections, scanned artwork from the kids, even screenshots of Emily's presentation, photos of the bracelet, and the original script she used. It's all there. Preserved. A family Bible, but for truth. We have new friends now, real ones. Kennedy still visits with her twins. My coworker Adriana, who once left her own religious cult, now hosts a monthly healing potluck at her home for women with estranged families. We go sometimes. Not to trauma dump. Just to be among people who understand the absence without explanation. Emily bakes cookies for those nights. Lucas makes name tags that say things like Chief Wolf of the Pack and Truth Sorcerer. There's laughter now. Warmth. The kind that doesn't make you flinch. I don't look at my family's online profiles anymore. I don't search for updates. I don't ask mutuals. If they're still talking, I don't hear it. If they're still twisting the story, I don't feel it. Because for the first time in my life, the truth lives somewhere it can't be erased. It lives in my children. It lives in pages. It lives in me. And it doesn't ask for validation anymore.